A local police officer thought he had the perfect suspect. A large black man, covered in mud and blood, standing inside an affluent suburban veterinary clinic with a severely injured German Shepherd. Driven by pure prejudice and absolute arrogance, the officer handcuffed the man on the burning asphalt and called animal control to have the dog destroyed. He believed his badge gave him the ultimate power to ruin a life. But that local cop just made the biggest, most fatal mistake of his entire career. He had absolutely no idea that the quiet man he pushed against the patrol car was an active-duty Navy SEAL. And he certainly did not know that the bleeding dog inside was a highly classified military hero. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments which country you are watching from, and if you love stories that melt your heart, please subscribe to support our channel. The engine of the pickup truck roared. Derek gripped the steering wheel. His knuckles turned white against the leather. He slammed his boot on the gas pedal. The truck sped down the quiet suburban streets of Florida. Palm trees and manicured lawns blurred past the windows. He ignored the speed limit. He ignored the stop signs. He only cared about the passenger next to him. Apollo lay motionless on the passenger seat. The large German Shepherd breathed in short gasps. A thick towel wrapped tightly around his midsection. The fabric soaked up a terrifying amount of dark blood. Every few seconds, Apollo let out a weak whimper. The sound tore through Derek's chest. "Hold on, buddy," Derek said. His voice cracked. "We are almost there. Stay with me, Apollo. Do not quit on me now." Derek was an active-duty Navy SEAL. He had faced heavy gunfire. He had survived impossible odds. He had stood in active war zones without flinching. But right now, his hands shook. He glanced over at the dog. Apollo shifted and rested his heavy head on Derek's thigh. Even in pain, the dog sought comfort from his handler. Derek remembered the day they met. The military assigned Apollo to him 3 years ago. Back then, Apollo was a young pup. Derek was a quiet soldier who preferred to work alone. They trained together. They ate together in the dirt. They slept on the same cold floors in foreign countries. Apollo became more than a working dog. He became Derek's partner. Apollo had saved Derek's life twice. Once, the dog sniffed out a hidden explosive device. Another time, Apollo leaped and took down an armed enemy fighter. Now, the roles were reversed. Derek had to save Apollo. The accident happened during a training exercise in the swamplands that morning. A rusted piece of metal from a submerged structure pierced Apollo's side as he swam across a channel. The wound was deep. The bleeding did not stop. The base medical officer told Derek to get Apollo to the nearest specialized surgical clinic immediately. The base hospital lacked the emergency equipment needed for this trauma. Derek grabbed his dog, loaded him into his personal truck, and drove. Derek still wore his tactical gear. His t-shirt and cargo pants were covered in thick mud, sweat, and swamp water. He smelled of dirt and blood. He looked rough. He did not care. Up ahead, he spotted the sign for the Oakwood Veterinary Clinic. The clinic sat in an affluent neighborhood. Luxury cars filled the parking lot. Neatly trimmed hedges lined the walkways. Derek swerved the truck into the lot. The tires screeched against the asphalt. He parked directly in front of the main entrance. He ignored the no parking signs. Derek jumped out of the truck. He left the engine running. He ran to the passenger side and yanked the door open. He slid his arms under Apollo. The dog felt incredibly heavy. Derek lifted him carefully. He cradled the German Shepherd securely against his chest. Warm blood seeped through the towel and stained Derek's shirt. Derek kicked the double glass doors open. He stepped into the clinic lobby. The lobby was bright and quiet. Soft music played from hidden speakers. Several people sat on leather chairs. They held small dogs and purebred cats. They wore expensive clothes. They looked up in shock when the doors crashed open. Gasps echoed through the room. Customers pulled their pets closer. They stared at the large black man covered in mud and blood. They stared at the bleeding animal in his arms. A young receptionist stood behind a polished counter. She froze. Her eyes went wide. "I need a doctor right now," Derek shouted. His voice echoed off the walls. "He is losing too much blood. He needs surgery immediately." The receptionist blinked. "Sir, you cannot. Do you have a scheduled appointment? Do you see this blood?" Derek stepped forward. He kept his voice steady. "He is dying. Get a surgeon out here now." A door opened behind the counter. A tall woman in blue scrubs walked out. She was Dr. Evans, the lead veterinary surgeon. She took one look at Derek and the bleeding dog. Her expression changed to instant focus. "Bring him back here," Dr. Evans ordered. She pointed down a bright hallway. "Operating room 2. Move quickly." Derek did not hesitate. He followed the doctor. He carried Apollo into a sterile surgical room. A stainless steel table sat in the center. "Lay him down gently," Dr. Evans instructed. 2 veterinary nurses rushed into the room. They pulled on gloves and grabbed supplies. Derek lowered Apollo onto the metal table. The dog let out a low whine. Derek pressed his forehead against Apollo's snout. "You fight this," Derek whispered to the dog. "You hear me? You stay with me. You fight." "Doctor." Evans stepped up to the table. She examined the wound. "We need an IV line right away," she told the nurses. "Prepare the anesthesia. We have to stop this internal bleeding." Derek took a slow step back. He gave the medical team space to work. He watched them move urgently around his friend. His hands were covered in Apollo's blood. He wiped them on his pants. His breathing was heavy. "Sir, doctor," Evans said firmly. "You need to wait out in the lobby. We will do everything we can to save him." Derek nodded. He took one last look at Apollo. The nurses worked fast to stabilize the dog. Derek turned around and walked out of the room. The heavy door clicked shut behind him. He walked back out to the lobby. The room was silent. The customers still stared at him. Derek ignored them. He walked over to an empty corner seat and sat down. He leaned his elbows on his knees. He buried his face in his hands. The adrenaline faded. The reality of the situation settled in. Derek prayed silently for his partner. Outside the clinic, a police patrol car rolled into the parking lot. It parked directly behind Derek's idling truck. The clinic lobby doors opened again. Derek did not look up. He did not know that his nightmare was just beginning. The surgical room doors clicked shut. Derek stood alone in the bright hallway. He looked down at his hands. Apollo's blood stained his skin. The dark red color looked bright under the fluorescent lights. He walked back to the waiting area. His heavy boots left faint, muddy prints on the pristine white floor tiles. The Oakwood Veterinary Clinic catered to the wealthy. Abstract paintings hung on the walls. Leather chairs circled low glass tables. Magazines about luxury yachts and purebred show dogs rested on the tables. The air smelled of vanilla and expensive cleaning supplies. Derek did not fit in. He wore muddy cargo pants and a torn, blood-soaked shirt. He was a large, muscular black man. His presence disrupted the quiet elegance of the room. 4 other people sat in the lobby. 2 women held small, groomed poodles. An older man sat with a Persian cat in a carrier. A younger man tapped on a tablet. They all stared at Derek. Their eyes tracked his every movement. They held their pets tighter. Nobody spoke. The silence felt heavy. Derek ignored them. He chose a seat in the far corner. He sat down and leaned forward. He rested his elbows on his knees. He focused his eyes on the hallway that led to the surgical rooms. He needed to hear news. He needed to know his partner would survive. The glass doors at the front entrance slid open. Officer Vance walked into the clinic. Vance was a local patrol officer for the Oakwood neighborhood. He was a man in his late 30s. He had a heavy build and a thick neck. His police uniform fit tightly across his stomach. He wore his hair slicked back. His face held a permanent, arrogant smirk. Vance carried a radio on his shoulder and a heavy-duty belt around his waist. He walked with a slow, exaggerated swagger. Vance usually stopped by the clinic on Tuesdays to chat with the staff and grab a free cup of coffee. He liked the affluent neighborhood. He liked the feeling of authority it gave him over the residents. Today, Vance stopped just inside the doors. He looked at the floor. He saw the muddy boot prints. He saw the small drops of blood leading from the entrance toward the hallway. His eyes narrowed. He followed the trail. His gaze landed on Derek. Vance stood perfectly still. He observed the man in the corner. He noted the dark skin, the dirty clothes, the bloodstains, and the heavy boots. He glanced out the large front window. He saw the battered, muddy pickup truck parked illegally in the front zone. The truck sat right next to a row of imported luxury sedans. A story immediately formed in the officer's mind. It was a story built entirely on prejudice. Vance did not see a desperate man waiting for news about his injured dog. Vance saw a criminal. He saw a thug who did not belong in this part of town. The blood on Derek's shirt confirmed his suspicions. Vance assumed the blood came from something illegal. Vance adjusted his duty belt. He puffed out his chest. He took a slow, deliberate step toward the corner. Derek did not notice the officer at first. His mind was behind the surgical doors. He replayed the accident in the swamp. He thought about the sharp metal tearing into his dog. He prayed the doctor could stop the bleeding. The heavy footsteps stopped right in front of him. A shadow fell over Derek. Derek looked up. He saw the police uniform first. Then he saw the name tag. Vance. Finally, he looked at the officer's face. Vance stood with his feet planted wide. He rested his right hand on his belt, dangerously close to his weapon. He looked down at Derek. His eyes scanned the blood on Derek's shirt. He wrinkled his nose in disgust. The other people in the lobby watched intently. The older man with the cat leaned forward. The women whispered to each other. They seemed relieved that the police had arrived. They looked at Vance as a protector. Derek stayed seated. He kept his hands visible. He took a slow breath. He did not want any trouble. He only wanted to wait for his dog. "You look like you had a rough morning," Vance said. His tone lacked any empathy. It dripped with sarcasm. Derek kept his voice calm. "My dog had an accident. He is in surgery." Vance did not move. He kept blocking Derek's view of the hallway. "An accident? Is that what you call it?" Derek frowned. "Yes, an accident." Vance looked around the immaculate lobby. He looked back at Derek's muddy boots. "This is a high-end clinic. The doctors here treat show dogs. They treat expensive pets. They do not usually deal with your kind of problems." Derek felt a spark of anger in his chest. He pushed it down. He remembered his training. He maintained his composure. "They are saving his life. That is all that matters." "Where did all that blood come from?" Vance asked. He pointed a thick finger at Derek's shirt. "That is a lot of blood for a simple accident." "I told you," Derek said. His voice dropped lower. "My dog got hurt. He got cut on a piece of metal." Vance chuckled. It was a cold, humorless sound. "A piece of metal. Right. Let me guess. You two were just out for a morning stroll, and he tripped over a fence." Derek stared at the officer. The hostility was clear. Vance had made up his mind before speaking a single word. "I am just sitting here, waiting for the doctor," Derek said. He shifted his weight on the chair. "I am not causing any problems." Vance took half a step closer. He invaded Derek's personal space. He leaned down slightly. His face grew serious. "I know exactly what is going on here. I have seen guys like you before. You drive into my town with a bleeding animal. You cover the floors in mud and blood. You think I am stupid?" Derek gripped the edge of his seat. "I do not know what you are talking about, officer." Vance smiled. It was a nasty, knowing smile. "I am talking about those deep cuts. I am talking about the blood. You expect me to believe an accident did that? Or did he get those injuries in a fighting pit?" The accusation hung in the air. The words echoed in the quiet lobby. Derek felt his muscles tighten. The insult to Apollo was unbearable. The officer stood there, blocking the path, blocking the light, armed with ignorance and authority. Derek knew the situation was about to escalate. He looked straight into the officer's eyes. "You have no idea what you are talking about," Derek said quietly. Vance did not like Derek's tone. The officer straightened his posture. He rested his hand heavily on his duty belt. He wanted to make his authority clear. He was used to people cowering when he raised his voice. He expected immediate compliance. "Stand up," Vance ordered. Derek remained seated. He looked at the surgical hallway. He looked back at Vance. "I am waiting for the doctor. I am not causing a disturbance. I just want to sit here quietly." "I said stand up." Vance raised his voice. The sound echoed in the quiet lobby. The older man with the cat jumped. One of the women gasped and pulled her poodle closer to her chest. She looked at Derek with pure terror in her eyes. Derek took a deep breath. He remembered his training. A Navy SEAL learns to control his emotions in the most extreme conditions. A hostile local police officer was a minor obstacle compared to an enemy ambush. Derek slowly stood up. He towered over Vance. Derek stood 6 feet 3 inches tall. His shoulders were broad. His physical presence was naturally intimidating. He kept his hands open and visible at his sides. Vance took a half step back, instinctively. Then he caught himself. He puffed out his chest again to hide his brief moment of fear. He did not like looking up at anyone. "Hand over your identification," Vance demanded. He snapped his fingers impatiently. "Right now. Let us see exactly who you are." Derek reached slowly into his muddy cargo pocket. He kept his movements deliberate and visible. He did not want to give Vance any excuse to draw a weapon or use force. He pulled out his leather wallet. He removed his standard driver's license. He kept his military ID hidden behind a flap of leather. He handed the plastic card to the officer. Vance snatched the card. He held it up to the light. "Derek, is that it? Just Derek Thorne?" "My full name is on the card," Derek said. Vance squinted at the license. "Okay, Derek, where do you work? How do you afford to bring a dog to an expensive place like this?" "I am employed," Derek said flatly, "and my dog needed emergency care." This was the closest facility with a surgical unit capable of handling severe trauma. "That does not answer my question," Vance pressed. He tapped the edge of the license against his chin. "You come in here looking like you just crawled out of a swamp. You are covered in blood. You bring in a bleeding dog. You refuse to answer basic questions. This all looks very suspicious." "I answered your questions," Derek replied. "I told you it was an accident during a run." Vance shook his head. He smirked. "I know a fighting dog when I see one. German shepherds are aggressive. People use them in underground rings. You take them out to the woods. You let them tear each other apart for money. Then you bring the loser in here and claim he fell on some metal. You think I was born yesterday?" The accusation hit Derek hard. His hands curled into fists at his sides. Apollo was a decorated military working dog. Apollo had saved American lives overseas. Apollo was a hero. This ignorant officer was reducing his partner to a vicious fighting animal. Derek ground his teeth together. The muscles in his jaw tightened. The disrespect was staggering. "My dog is not a fighter," Derek said. His voice dropped to a low, dangerous register. "He is highly trained. He is a professional. He saves lives." Vance laughed out loud. "A professional?" "Right. And what are you? His manager? You must make a lot of cash running those illegal bets." The receptionist behind the counter picked up a desk phone. Her hands shook visibly. She pretended to organize papers on her desk. She did not dial any numbers. She just wanted to look busy and stay out of the line of fire. The other customers watched the confrontation with wide eyes. They fully believed Vance's narrative. To them, Derek looked the part of a dangerous criminal. He looked like trouble. "I want my license back," Derek said. He held out his hand. He wanted to end this conversation. Vance slipped the license into his own uniform shirt pocket. He patted it. "You will get it back when I am done investigating this incident. Right now, you are a prime suspect in an animal cruelty case. You are not going anywhere. Derek took a step forward. You have no evidence of a crime. You are making assumptions based on nothing. Return my property immediately. Watch your step, Vance warned. He rested his hand on his holster again. He unfastened the top button. You are bordering on interfering with an official investigation. Do not give me a reason to lock you up right now. Derek stopped. He forced his fists to unclench. He forced his breathing to slow down. He could easily disarm Vance. He could neutralize the arrogant officer in less than 3 seconds without breaking a sweat. But that would only cause a massive problem. It would delay his return to base. It would risk Apollo's safety. He had to endure this harassment. He had to wait for the doctor. Suddenly, a sharp bark echoed from the back hallway. Derek recognized the sound instantly. It was not a painful whine. It was a loud bark of distress. It sounded like Apollo waking up from anesthesia too soon or reacting to a sudden pain. Derek's focus shifted entirely. He forgot about Vance. He forgot about the lobby and the staring customers. He only cared about his dog. Derek turned his body and started to walk toward the surgical doors. "Hey!" Vance shouted. "Where do you think you are going?" "I am not done talking to you." Derek ignored him. He kept walking with long, determined strides. "I need to check on my dog. He needs me back there." Vance moved quickly. He jogged forward and stepped directly into Derek's path. He spread his arms wide. He planted his boots firmly on the floor. "You are not going anywhere," Vance said. His face turned bright red with anger. "You are staying right here in this lobby until I say otherwise." Derek stopped, just inches away from the officer. He looked down at Vance. The height difference was obvious. The power difference was even more obvious. "Get out of my way," Derek said. His voice carried zero emotion. It was completely flat. It was the absolute voice of a man who was ready to remove an obstacle by any means necessary. Vance felt a sudden chill run down his spine, but his immense pride would not let him back down in front of an audience. He stood his ground. He unclipped the retention strap on his heavy holster. "You take one more step," Vance threatened loudly, "and you are going straight to the ground." Derek stared at the officer. He did not blink. The clinic lobby fell completely silent again. The soft background music seemed to vanish entirely. Every eye in the room locked onto the two men. The older man pulled his cat carrier securely onto his lap. The receptionist slowly lowered the phone back onto its cradle and stepped back against the wall. "My dog is back there," Derek repeated. He spoke slowly. He wanted to make sure Vance understood every single word. "He is bleeding. He might be dying. I am going to walk through those doors right now. You need to step aside." Vance felt his heart pound against his ribs. He had expected the man to cower. He expected the man to submit to the shiny badge. Instead, this stranger was looking at him like he was nothing more than an annoying insect. Vance could not handle the blatant disrespect. His hand gripped the handle of his weapon tightly. "I am giving you a lawful order," Vance said. His voice shook slightly but remained loud. "Step back right now." Derek did not move. He stood perfectly still. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. The ticking clock on the lobby wall sounded like a heavy hammer hitting a metal anvil. The next few seconds would determine everything. Derek stared down the officer. Vance did not move. He stood like a stone wall in the middle of the lobby. Derek heard the bark again. It sounded weaker this time. Every second counted. Derek needed to speak with Dr. Evans. He needed to know if Apollo was surviving the surgery. "Officer Vance," Derek said. His tone remained perfectly level. "My dog is crying out. I am his handler. I need to be there for him. Move aside." Vance felt the heat rise in his cheeks. The entire lobby watched him. He could not look weak. He puffed his chest out further. He tapped his fingers against the grip of his duty weapon. It was a subtle threat. "You do not tell me what to do," Vance said. "You do not give orders here. I am the law in this town. You are a suspect in an ongoing investigation. Now, back away." Derek glanced over his shoulder. The receptionist pressed her back firmly against the wall. The older man clutched his cat carrier tightly. The two women with the poodles whispered frantically to each other. None of them offered to help. None of them questioned the officer's aggressive behavior. They looked at Derek with fear and judgment. They saw a large, muddy, bloody black man arguing with a uniformed police officer. They had already decided who the villain was. Derek turned his attention back to Vance. He had dealt with armed insurgents. He had negotiated with hostile warlords. He knew how to read a man. Vance was not looking for justice. Vance was looking for submission. He wanted to break Derek down in front of an audience. "There is no investigation," Derek stated calmly. "You have no probable cause. I brought an injured animal to a veterinary clinic. That is not a crime." "You are delaying medical updates for a patient." "Step out of my way." Vance snapped. The calm logic offended him more than yelling would have. He decided it was time to escalate the situation. He wanted absolute control. "That is it," Vance shouted. "You are interfering with a police officer. You are resisting my lawful commands. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." Derek did not turn around. He stood his ground. "I am not resisting. I am asserting my rights. I have done nothing illegal." Vance unsnapped his holster. The loud click echoed off the polished tile floor. The sound sent a wave of panic through the room. One of the women screamed softly. The receptionist ducked behind the counter. Derek saw the movement. His combat training flared to life. His eyes tracked the officer's hand. If Vance drew the weapon, Derek would have to disarm him to survive. But doing so would guarantee a massive police response. It would jeopardize Apollo. Derek forced his muscles to relax. He slowly raised his hands to chest level, palms facing outward. "Do not touch your weapon," Derek warned. His voice carried a cold, absolute authority. "Keep your hand off your gun. There is no threat here." Vance hesitated. He felt a sudden spike of real fear. The man standing in front of him did not panic when the holster clicked. Most people flinched or begged. Derek simply analyzed the situation like a predator sizing up a target. Vance realized he might have pushed too far, but his ego refused to let him retreat. Vance kept his right hand hovering over his gun. He reached to his back belt with his left hand. He pulled out a pair of metal handcuffs. They rattled loudly in the quiet room. "Turn around," Vance ordered again. His voice cracked slightly. "You are under arrest for obstruction of justice and suspected animal cruelty. Turn around right now." Derek looked at the handcuffs. He looked at the surgical hallway. He thought about Apollo lying on the metal table. He thought about the mission. He thought about the oath he took to serve and protect his country. He was currently being treated like a violent criminal by a man sworn to protect the local community. The injustice burned inside him. "You are making a massive mistake," Derek said quietly. "You do not know who you are dealing with." "I know exactly what I am dealing with," Vance sneered. He regained some of his false courage. "I am dealing with a street thug who thinks he can bring his illegal dogfights into my town. Now, turn around." Derek slowly turned his back to the officer. He kept his hands visible. He lowered them to his waist. Vance grabbed Derek's left wrist. The officer's grip was tight and aggressive. He yanked the arm roughly behind Derek's back. Derek did not resist. He let his arm move freely. He felt the cold metal of the handcuff snap around his wrist. Vance clicked the teeth tight. The metal dug into Derek's skin. "Give me the other hand," Vance barked. Derek moved his right hand behind his back. Vance grabbed it and slammed the second cuff onto his wrist. The officer tightened them far more than necessary. The pain was immediate, but Derek's face remained completely blank. He did not give Vance the satisfaction of a grimace. "You have the right to remain silent." Vance began reciting the Miranda warning. He sounded triumphant. He had won the standoff. He had the large, intimidating man securely restrained in metal chains. The lobby customers let out collective sighs of relief. The danger was over. The police officer had handled the scary criminal. They nodded to each other in approval. Derek stood silently in the handcuffs. He looked at his boots. They were still covered in swamp mud and Apollo's blood. The situation had spun completely out of control. He was an active-duty Navy SEAL, a highly decorated special operator, currently arrested on fake charges by a small-town cop. "Let us go outside," Vance ordered. He grabbed Derek by the shoulder and pushed him toward the front doors. "We are going to wait by my cruiser." "My dog," Derek said. He looked back toward the hallway. "I need to know he is okay." Vance laughed bitterly. "Forget about the dog. I am calling animal control right now. That animal is evidence of a crime. They will take it from here." Derek stopped walking. He planted his feet. Even handcuffed, he felt like a solid brick wall. He turned his head and locked eyes with Vance. The cold intensity in Derek's gaze made the officer physically recoil. "If you make that call," Derek said in a low, dangerous whisper, "you will end your career today. Do not call animal control." Vance shoved Derek hard from behind. "Walk," the officer yelled, trying to hide his sudden nervousness. "Get outside." Derek allowed himself to be pushed through the glass doors. The hot Florida sun hit his face. The real fight was just beginning. Derek stumbled forward as Officer Vance shoved him through the automatic glass doors. The intense Florida heat hit Derek immediately. The air felt thick and heavy with humidity. Sweat instantly formed on his forehead. He kept his balance despite the heavy metal handcuffs biting into his wrists behind his back. Vance walked close behind him. The officer gripped Derek by the back of his shirt. He pushed Derek toward the police cruiser parked directly behind the muddy pickup truck. "Keep moving," Vance ordered. He sounded out of breath. "Do not stop until you hit the car." Derek walked steadily. He did not fight the push. He reached the side of the white police vehicle. The morning sun baked the metal exterior. "Turn around and face the car," Vance commanded. "Spread your legs." Derek turned and leaned his chest against the hot metal. The heat radiated through his blood-stained shirt. He spread his boots apart. Vance kicked Derek's right ankle forcefully to make the stance wider. The officer conducted a rough and invasive search. He patted down Derek's cargo pants. He checked the pockets. He found nothing but a set of keys and a cell phone. Vance pulled the items out and tossed them onto the hood of the cruiser. "Nothing on you," Vance muttered. He sounded disappointed. "Where did you hide the cash from the dogfights? In the truck?" Derek pressed his cheek against the warm glass of the cruiser window. "I already told you the truth. You are wasting time." Vance scoffed. He stepped back and pulled a black radio microphone from his shoulder strap. He pressed the button. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4. I need you to contact County Animal Control. Have them send a transport truck to the Oakwood Veterinary Clinic immediately." A female voice crackled over the radio speaker. "Copy, Unit 4. "What is the situation?" Vance looked at Derek with a smug expression. "I have a suspect in custody for suspected animal cruelty and illegal dog fighting. The evidence is inside the clinic. It is a large German Shepherd. The animal is highly aggressive and dangerous. Tell Animal Control they need to come collect it. The dog needs to be put down." Derek felt his blood run cold. The heat of the sun vanished. A freezing anger washed over his entire body. Apollo was a decorated military hero. Apollo had taken bullets. Apollo had saved American soldiers. Now, an ignorant local police officer was signing a death warrant for the dog over a bruised ego. Derek slowly turned his head. He looked over his shoulder at Vance. He did not yell, he did not curse. He spoke in a voice so quiet and absolute that it cut through the noise of the nearby traffic. "Cancel that call." Vance released the radio button. He puffed his chest out. "Excuse me?" "Cancel the call to Animal Control right now," Derek repeated. The dead calm in his eyes was terrifying. "If they walk into that clinic and touch my dog, you will regret it for the rest of your life. You just crossed a boundary. There is no coming back from this." Vance felt a sudden knot form in his stomach. The threat did not sound like a standard street criminal mouthing off. It sounded like a promise from a man who knew exactly how to dismantle someone piece by piece. But Vance was too proud. He looked at the clinic windows. Several customers stood behind the glass, watching the arrest. Vance needed to maintain his image of total control. "Are you threatening a police officer?" Vance stepped closer. He pointed a finger at Derek's face. "You are in handcuffs. You have zero power here. I make the rules. That dog is a menace to this community. He is going to be destroyed, and you are going to jail for a very long time." Derek turned his face back to the cruiser window. He stopped speaking to Vance. The officer was a lost cause. The man was blinded by arrogance and prejudice. Derek shifted his focus inward. He calculated the variables. He needed a plan. Inside the clinic, Dr. Evans was operating. She would not let animal control take a dying patient off her surgical table. Derek trusted her professionalism. He knew she would buy him some time, but animal control would wait in the lobby. They would seize Apollo the second the surgery finished. Derek could not allow that to happen. He tested the strength of the handcuffs. The metal chain was thick. The locking mechanism was standard-issue police gear. Derek knew exactly how to defeat it. He had a hidden key concealed inside the thick hem of his cargo pants. It was a standard survival tactic for his specialized unit. He could drop his hands, retrieve the key, and free himself in under 10 seconds. But breaking out of the handcuffs would trigger a massive police response. Vance would draw his weapon. Other officers would arrive. A shootout in a suburban parking lot would put civilians at risk. It would also ruin his military career. He had to endure the humiliation. He had to wait. "You think you are tough?" Vance mocked him from behind. "You guys always act tough until you end up in a concrete cell. We will see how much attitude you have after a weekend in the county lockup." Vance walked to the driver's side door. He opened it and threw Derek's keys and phone onto the passenger seat. He left the door open to let the air conditioning run. He walked back to Derek. "Stand up straight," Vance ordered. He grabbed Derek by the arm and pulled him away from the car. "We are going to wait right here in the sun until the transport truck arrives. I want you to watch them carry that fighting dog out of here." Derek stood tall in the blinding sunlight. Sweat dripped down his neck and soaked into the collar of his shirt. His wrists throbbed with a dull, constant pain where the metal cuffs dug into his flesh. The physical discomfort meant nothing to him. He endured hellish conditions during selection. He survived brutal interrogations during training exercises. This arrogant officer was nothing but a minor inconvenience. Derek focused his mind on Apollo. He visualized the dog breathing. He pictured the strong heartbeat. He sent every ounce of his willpower through the brick walls of the clinic toward the operating room. "Just wait," Vance said. He leaned against the side of his cruiser and crossed his arms. "They will be here soon. Then your whole operation gets shut down." Derek did not respond. He stared straight ahead at the tree line across the street. He knew something that Vance did not know. The officer had set off a chain of events that he could not possibly control. The local police department had no jurisdiction over military assets, and Apollo was a highly classified military asset. Vance thought he had the ultimate authority. He thought the shiny badge on his chest made him a king. He had no idea that a massive storm was currently gathering on the horizon. He had no idea that his career, his authority, and his pride were about to be shattered completely. Derek remained perfectly still. He simply waited for the storm to arrive. The heart monitor beeped in a steady, rapid rhythm. The sound filled the bright surgical room. Dr. Evans stood over the stainless steel table. Her hands moved with absolute precision. She focused entirely on the massive German shepherd lying unconscious before her. The overhead surgical lights eliminated all shadows in the room. Apollo breathed through a plastic tube. A machine delivered a precise mixture of oxygen and anesthesia into his lungs. Two veterinary nurses stood on opposite sides of the table. They handed instruments to the doctor and monitored the dog's vital signs. Clamp. Dr. Evans said. A nurse immediately placed a small metal clamp into her open palm. Dr. Evans applied it to a severed blood vessel deep inside the wound. The heavy bleeding finally began to slow down. The rusted metal had caused severe damage. It sliced through a thick layer of muscle on the dog's right flank. It missed the lungs and the liver by a fraction of an inch. Dr. Evans felt a wave of relief. She had performed hundreds of surgeries, but trauma cases always carried a high risk. She began the slow, difficult process of repairing the torn tissue. "His blood pressure is stabilizing," the lead nurse reported. She checked the digital display on the monitor. "Heart rate is dropping to a normal resting pace. He is handling the anesthesia well." "Good," Dr. Evans replied. She did not look up. She kept her eyes locked on the surgical field. "Prepare the heavy sutures. We need to close the muscle wall before we tackle the skin laceration." For the next 45 minutes, the room remained quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of the machines and the brief professional commands from the doctor. Dr. Evans worked meticulously. She stitched the damaged muscle fibers back together. She flushed the area with a sterile saline solution to prevent infection from the swamp water. Finally, she began to close the outer layer of skin. She tied the last surgical knot and stepped back from the table. She pulled off her blood-stained gloves and dropped them into a red biohazard bin. She let out a long exhale. "He is going to make it," Dr. Evans said. She looked at the sleeping dog. Her tense shoulders relaxed. "He is strong. His physical condition is incredible. Keep him on the fluids and monitor his temperature closely as he wakes up." The nurses nodded and began to clean the surgical site. They applied a thick bandage around Apollo's midsection to protect the fresh stitches. Dr. Evans walked over to a metal counter near the sink. The nurses had placed the dog's personal items there before the surgery began. The items included a heavy nylon harness and a thick collar. Both pieces of gear were completely caked in dried mud and swamp water. She picked up the collar. It felt unusually heavy. It did not look like a standard pet collar bought at a local store. The material was military-grade webbing. A large metal buckle secured the ends. Dr. Evans turned the collar over in her hands. She noticed a thick layer of mud covering a metal plate attached to the fabric. She turned on the sink. She took a clean towel, ran it under warm water, and scrubbed the mud off the metal plate. The dirt washed away, revealing a dark, matte black metal tag. The tag was securely riveted to the collar. "Dr." Evans leaned closer to read the engraved silver text. Her eyes widened as she read the words. The top line read, "Property of U.S. Department of Defense." The second line read, "Military working dog." Below that, the tag displayed a name, Apollo. It included a long identification number, a blood type, and a specific active duty status code. Dr. Evans stared at the tag. A cold realization washed over her. She remembered the loud, arrogant local police officer in her lobby. She remembered the officer accusing the large, quiet man of running an illegal dogfighting ring. The officer had judged the man based on his appearance and the blood on his clothes. The officer was entirely wrong. The man in the lobby was not a criminal. He was a military handler, and the dog on her surgical table was a highly trained, active-duty soldier in the United States Armed Forces. She flipped the thick collar over. The back of the metal plate contained a second engraving. It was a set of emergency instructions. The text read, "In case of emergency or separation, do not contact local authorities. Contact Special Operations Command immediately." A 10-digit phone number sat below the instruction. It was not a standard emergency line. It was a direct, encrypted military contact number. Dr. Evans felt her heart beat faster. She looked back at Apollo. The dog rested peacefully on the table. He was a decorated hero, and a local patrol officer wanted him turned over to animal control. She knew she had to act fast. She knew the local police had no jurisdiction over military assets. "Keep an eye on him, Doctor," Evans told her nurses. "Do not let anyone enter this room, no matter who asks. Lock the door from the inside." The nurses looked confused but nodded in agreement. Dr. Evans stepped out of the surgical suite. She walked down a short hallway and entered her private office. She closed the door and locked it behind her. She walked to her desk and picked up her personal cell phone. She looked at the number written on a notepad where she had copied it from the tag. She dialed the 10 digits carefully. The phone rang only once. A man answered immediately. His voice was sharp, professional, and entirely devoid of emotion. "Operations," the voice said. "Hello," Dr. Evans started. She found herself speaking quickly. "My name is Dr. Sarah Evans. I am a veterinary surgeon at the Oakwood Clinic in Florida. I am calling about a military working dog named Apollo. His handler brought him in for emergency surgery." The line went silent for 2 seconds. When the man spoke again, his tone was intensely focused. "Doctor, what is the status of the dog?" "He is stable," she replied. "He suffered a severe laceration, but I closed the wound. He is in recovery right now." "And the handler?" the man asked. "Doctor?" Evans looked toward the door of her office. "That is why I am calling. The handler is out in the parking lot. A local police officer arrested him. The officer believes this is a dogfighting case. The officer is trying to call local animal control to take the dog away." The silence on the line felt heavy and dangerous. Dr. Evans could hear the sound of a keyboard clacking rapidly in the background. "Dr. Evans," the voice said. The authority in the man's tone was absolute. "Do not release that animal to anyone. Keep your doors locked. Do not engage with the local police. A retrieval team is inbound to your location right now. They will arrive in less than 10 minutes. "Understood," Dr. Evans said. The call disconnected. Dr. Evans put her phone down on her desk. She looked out the small window of her office. The quiet suburban street outside remained still and peaceful, but she knew that was about to change. A storm was heading straight for the Oakwood Veterinary Clinic, and Officer Vance had no idea what he had just unleashed. The Florida sun beat down mercilessly on the asphalt parking lot. Heat waves shimmered above the hoods of the parked luxury cars. Officer Vance stood in the minimal shade provided by his police cruiser. He drank from a plastic water bottle. He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. He looked very pleased with himself. Derek stood completely exposed to the blazing sun. He remained pressed against the side of the white patrol car. The metal felt like a hot stove against his legs. His wrists burned where the steel handcuffs dug into his skin. He did not move. He did not ask for water. He did not complain about the heat. He focused his mind and controlled his breathing. "Any minute now," Vance said. He tossed the empty water bottle into the front seat of his car. "Animal control is on the way. They will go in there, grab that aggressive animal, and take it straight to the pound. They have special protocols for fighting dogs. It will be over fast." Derek kept his eyes fixed on the distant tree line. "You do not know what you are doing. You still have a chance to unlock these cuffs and walk away." Vance laughed loudly. The sound grated against the quiet suburban street. "Walk away? Are you kidding me? This is the biggest bust I have had all year. An illegal dog-fighting operation right here in Oakwood. The captain is going to give me a commendation. And you are going to a federal penitentiary." Inside the clinic lobby, the small crowd pressed their faces against the large glass windows. They watched the confrontation outside. They felt safe behind the thick glass. They believed the brave police officer had the dangerous criminal under complete control. Derek ignored the staring eyes. He ignored the pain in his shoulders. He listened. A low, rhythmic thumping sound echoed in the distance. It sounded like distant thunder, but the sky above was a bright, cloudless blue. The sound grew steadily louder. The rhythm increased. Thump, thump, thump. Vance looked up at the sky. He frowned in confusion. "What is that noise?" "Is there a construction site nearby?" Derek knew the sound. He had heard it in the deserts of the Middle East. He had heard it over the jungles of South America. It was the sound of salvation. It was the sound of absolute, overwhelming force. The thumping rapidly turned into a deafening roar. The tall palm trees lining the street began to sway violently. Leaves and small branches snapped off and flew through the air. The wind picked up, swirling dirt and debris across the asphalt. Vance took a step back from his cruiser. He raised a hand to shield his eyes from the blowing dust. What the hell is going on? A massive, matte black UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter crested the tall trees across the street. It was a military gunship. It bore no civilian markings. It looked like a dark predator dropping out of the sky. The sheer size of the aircraft dwarfed everything in the affluent neighborhood. The pilot maneuvered the heavy machine with aggressive precision. He ignored the residential zoning laws. He ignored the noise ordinances. He aimed the helicopter directly at the wide, perfectly manicured grassy park located directly across from the veterinary clinic. The Black Hawk descended rapidly. The downwash from the massive main rotor blades created a violent hurricane on the ground. A thick cloud of dust, grass clippings, and dirt exploded outward. The wind slammed into the side of the police cruiser. It forced Vance to stumble backward and grab the door handle to keep from falling. Derek stood firm. He let the wind whip his clothes and cool his sweating skin. He watched the helicopter touch down heavily on the grass. The engine whined loudly as the pilot reduced power, but the rotors kept spinning. Inside the clinic, the customers screamed in panic. They dove for cover behind the leather chairs. The receptionist scrambled under her desk. They thought it was a terrorist attack or a plane crash. They had never seen a military gunship land in their quiet town. Vance stared at the Black Hawk in pure terror. His mouth hung open. He dropped his hand away from his weapon. His police badge suddenly felt very small and insignificant. He looked at the military aircraft, and then he looked back at the man in handcuffs. A terrifying realization began to form in his small mind. The side doors of the helicopter slid open simultaneously. A team of heavily armed military police poured out of the cabin. They moved with terrifying speed and synchronized precision. They wore full tactical gear, Kevlar vests, and dark helmets. They carried standard-issue assault rifles. They fanned out rapidly, securing a perimeter around the landing zone. Behind the tactical team, a single figure stepped down from the aircraft. It was Colonel Hastings, the base commander of the local Special Operations Command. He wore a crisp combat uniform. Silver eagles gleamed on his collar. His face was set in a mask of pure, concentrated fury. He did not look at the affluent neighborhood. He did not look at the expensive clinic. He locked his eyes directly on the Oakwood police cruiser and the two men standing beside it. Colonel Hastings began marching across the street. The military police squad fell in tightly behind him. They moved like a single, unstoppable machine. Their heavy combat boots pounded against the asphalt in unison. Vance felt his knees go weak. The blood drained from his face. He wanted to run, but his legs refused to move. He was a local patrol cop who handed out speeding tickets and harassed teenagers. He was currently watching an elite military strike team march directly toward him with their weapons at the ready. What is happening?" Vance stammered. His voice trembled violently. "Who are these guys?" Derek finally turned his head to look at the officer. The calm, icy expression on Derek's face had not changed at all. "I told you," Derek said quietly over the roar of the helicopter engines. "You made a massive mistake." Colonel Hastings crossed the center line of the street. He did not slow his pace. He marched straight into the parking lot. The heavily armed military police officers spread out, instantly surrounding Vance and the police cruiser. They held their rifles at the low ready position. Their eyes were hidden behind dark tactical goggles, but their intent was crystal clear. Colonel Hastings stopped exactly 3 feet away from Officer Vance. The colonel stood tall, projecting absolute authority. The wind from the spinning rotors whipped his uniform, but he did not blink. The military police officers stood like statues around the perimeter. They blocked the street entirely. Traffic stopped in both directions. Drivers stepped out of their cars in shock to watch the incredible scene unfold. Inside the clinic, Dr. Evans walked out of her office. She saw the helicopter through the front windows. She let out a long breath of relief. She turned to her staff and told them to prepare a transport gurney. She knew the cavalry had arrived to save her patient. Vance looked wildly around the circle of armed soldiers. He opened his mouth to speak, to demand an explanation, to assert his local jurisdiction. But his throat was completely dry. He could not make a single sound. He was a small man who had picked a fight with a giant, and now the giant's entire army had arrived to settle the score. Vance raised both of his hands in the air defensively. He backed away from Derek until his back hit the side mirror of his own car. He was completely trapped. The storm had arrived, and it was about to destroy him. The heavy boots of the military police scraped against the asphalt. They formed a tight ring around Officer Vance. The local cop pressed his back against the side mirror of his patrol car. He raised his hands higher. His breathing grew shallow and rapid. He looked at the assault rifles pointed at his chest. Colonel Hastings stopped in front of Vance. The colonel did not yell. He did not need to. His presence commanded the entire area. "Disarm him," Colonel Hastings ordered. Two military police officers stepped forward instantly. They grabbed Vance by the arms. They moved with practiced efficiency. One officer unclipped Vance's duty weapon from the holster. The other officer removed the spare magazines, the taser, and the radio. They stripped the local cop of every piece of authority he owned. Vance did not resist. He could not stop shaking. Colonel Hastings turned his attention to Derek. The colonel's hard expression softened slightly. He recognized the man standing against the car. "Sergeant Vance," Hastings said to his men, using the local cop's last name ironically. "Unlock those cuffs, now." Vance fumbled with his empty belt. He realized his keys were gone. One of the military police officers retrieved the small metal key from Vance's pocket. The soldier stepped behind Derek and unlocked the heavy steel cuffs. The metal clicked open. Derek brought his arms to the front. He rubbed his raw wrists. He did not look at the skin. He looked at Colonel Hastings. "Thank you, sir," Derek said. His voice remained perfectly steady. "Status of the dog?" Hastings asked. "Inside," Derek replied. "Surgery is complete. He is stable but needs immediate medical transport." Hastings raised his hand and signaled the Black Hawk. A team of 4 combat medics sprinted from the helicopter. They carried a specialized transport gurney and emergency medical equipment. They ran past the paralyzed local officer and pushed through the clinic doors. Inside the lobby, the customers watched in stunned silence. The 2 women clutched their poodles. The older man stared with his mouth open. The receptionist pointed a shaking finger down the hallway. The medics rushed into the surgical suite. "Doctor!" Evans stood ready. She had prepared a detailed medical chart. She briefed the lead medic on Apollo's vitals, the exact nature of the laceration, and the surgical repairs she had performed. She handed over the dog's military tags. "You did excellent work, doctor," the lead medic said. He reviewed the chart quickly. "You saved his life. We will take it from here." They transferred the large German Shepherd onto the military gurney. They secured his thick body with heavy nylon straps. They attached a portable heart monitor and a fresh IV bag filled with specialized fluids. They moved fast and communicated with brief, sharp commands. They rolled the gurney down the hallway, pushed through the quiet lobby, and burst out into the blazing sun. Derek watched them emerge from the clinic. He saw Apollo resting securely on the white sheets. The dog was still unconscious, but his chest rose and fell in a steady, powerful rhythm. Derek let out a deep, ragged breath. The massive weight lifted off his shoulders. The anger dissolved. His partner was safe. That was the only thing that mattered. Vance watched the medics load the large dog into the helicopter. He saw the military markings on the equipment. He finally understood the absolute magnitude of his mistake. He had not just harassed a local citizen, he had assaulted an elite military operator. He had attempted to authorize the execution of a highly classified military asset. His arrogance had blinded him completely to the truth. "Colonel," Vance choked out. His voice was a pathetic whisper. "I did not know. I thought he was a street criminal. I was just doing my job." Colonel Hastings turned back to Vance. His eyes were cold and unforgiving. "Your job is to protect and serve," Hastings stated flatly. "You saw a man in distress. You saw blood. You made an assumption based on prejudice. You ignored protocol. You abused your power. You assaulted an active-duty Navy SEAL. You ordered the destruction of a decorated K-9 hero. You are a disgrace to that uniform." Vance swallowed hard. He looked at the ground. He had no defense. He had no excuses left. "Local authorities are arriving," Hastings continued. The sound of distant sirens pierced the air. "I just spoke with your chief of police. You are suspended immediately. Federal agents will arrive at your station within the hour. You will face charges for assault, unlawful detainment, and interfering with a military operation. Your career is over." The wail of police sirens grew louder. 2 local patrol cars sped down the street and screeched to a halt at the edge of the perimeter. The local officers jumped out, but they did not intervene. They saw the military police. They saw the colonel. They stayed back and watched their colleague face his downfall. Derek walked over to Vance. The military police stepped aside to let him through. Derek stopped inches away from the disgraced officer. Vance looked up. His eyes were wide with fear and regret. He expected Derek to strike him. He expected anger. Derek did not raise his hands. He spoke in a low, absolute tone. "You judged me the second I walked through those doors," Derek said. "You looked at my clothes and my skin. You decided I was a criminal. You decided my dog was a monster. You wear a badge, but you do not understand honor. Honor is not about forcing people to submit to you. Honor is about doing the right thing when no one is looking. Apollo has more honor in his paws than you have in your entire body." Vance stared at Derek. A tear rolled down his sweaty cheek. The truth of the words hit him harder than any physical blow. He had built his entire life on intimidation and fake authority. Now he had absolutely nothing. "We are leaving," Colonel Hastings announced. Derek turned his back on Vance. He walked toward the Black Hawk. The rotors spun faster, kicking up a fresh cloud of dust. He climbed into the cabin and sat beside Apollo's gurney. He placed his hand gently on the dog's head. The military police fell back in perfect formation. They boarded the aircraft. The doors slid shut. The massive engine roared to full power. The Black Hawk lifted off the ground, leaving a hurricane of wind in its wake. On the ground, Officer Vance stood completely alone. The military perimeter vanished. The local officers approached him slowly. Their faces held zero sympathy. They had heard the radio chatter. They knew what he had done. One of the officers pulled out a pair of standard-issue handcuffs. They were the exact same type of handcuffs Vance had used to humiliate Derek earlier that morning. Vance turned around slowly. He lowered his head and put his hands behind his back. The cold metal clicked shut. He walked toward the back of the local patrol car. He looked up at the sky one last time. The Black Hawk disappeared over the horizon. The price for his arrogance was final. This story of Derek and Apollo reminds us of a powerful truth. True honor does not come from a position of authority or the power to intimidate others. True honor comes from doing what is right and protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Officer Vance allowed his prejudice to blind him, judging a hero by his appearance and assuming the worst about a loyal dog. From my perspective, this is a stark reminder that arrogance will always lead to downfall, while integrity stands the test of time. We must always look beyond the surface and treat everyone with the dignity they deserve. If this story of loyalty, justice, and the unbreakable bond between a soldier and his dog touched your heart, please share this video with your friends and family. Leave a comment below to let us know your thoughts, and do not forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories. May God bless you and your loved ones with peace, wisdom, and a heart full of compassion. Please comment Amen below if you believe in justice and respect.